Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Murder Most Foul. My guest today is E.J. Hammon. And she's probably, of all the people, this is a new guest. And it's easy to state because she is a self-proclaimed a Bundyphile. She's a Bundyphile. And she is self-proclaimed. And we'll get into all the things that drew her to that and how she covers Bundy. And obviously, she knows probably more about Bundy than many people do. So welcome, EJ.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
So let's begin with I love, which I'll probably use as because I can steal it if I want, the title of the podcast, Confessions of a Bundyphile.
Yes.
So that is what you call yourself. And again, I found you. It's one of these, just came up somewhere on Facebook or somewhere, Google, you just appeared. And you had a blog. You might still, but we'll talk about all the various digital things you have. But you had a blog that talked about, I'm assuming people wrote back to you, and you had a kind of a dialogue about Bundy, Ted Bundy, of course. And you're working on some other things. We'll talk about that too. You want to branch out from Bundy, but Bundy was the first one who caught you. Why, of all, we got Dahmer, we got TDK, we got all the wonderful people out there, but you've not, I won't say fixated, you focused on Bundy. And why was that?
First of all, he was number one. He was the first serial killer, lust killer that I read about. And I just really was taken aback by how normal he seemed and how very easily it would have been to be friends with him without being able to see the psychopathy behind his eyes. He was so good at hiding that for most people. Several of his victims also looked a great deal like my mother. So there was kind of that sense of if he had come to North Carolina in that era, she could have been a victim. And so Bundy has just always kind of held some sort of mystery for me. He has led me to really find a great deal of interest in other serial killers, mostly the lust killers, the ones who entangle murder and sex generally. So I've read a great deal about Dahmer. I've read a great deal about Gacy. I've read a great deal about Edmund Kemper and, the Moors murderers. And they're all extremely fascinating, but it all started with Ted Bundy. Well, I always wanted to be a writer. I was always a big reader. So it was kind of a natural step next. So by, eighth grade, age 13, I already knew I wanted to be a writer. And the more I tried to write fiction, the more I tried to write poetry, those just weren't as easy for me naturally. And then I stumbled upon true crime, and I realized I love the research. I love, retelling the story in a way that reimagines some of the personality traits and some of the inner thoughts of the killers. So for me, it really became about finding a different way, a unique angle to tell those stories. We've all heard the same boring story about these killers. I like doing different little aspects and angles on their life and re-examining them.
So you had a co-author on the book, Fabian Richard. How did you guys find each other?
Right. So the book itself, Fabian was already working on the idea. The idea of the book was to talk to different people that were affected by Bundy's actions. Anybody involved in his story, survivors, sheriff, there are attorneys, there's a journalist that interviewed him, and different people giving their opinion, different people from law enforcement. So what we asked them to do once he brought me on board was to provide a photo of that time, just a time in their life. One of the neighbors of one of the survivors just showed us a photo of what she looked like at that time when she was living in the house where the attack occurred, and kind of went through her story. So it was kind of a snapshot of that one moment in their life and how he changed their world. The way that I got on board was Fabian actually reached out to one of the survivors, Kathy Kleiner, and she and I are very good friends. And he said, I'd really like to have an American author helping me with this so that, I can kind of have that legitimacy, from the American side. So it was an easy enough project. He handled half of the articles. I handled half of them. We interviewed people that were involved. We brought new people in together. And just being able to, he translated what I did into French. Then he translated what he had written in French into English for some of the articles. And then I went in and retranslated them, if that makes sense, to a more American vernacular.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was an interesting collaboration. The situation with the publisher, I'm not 100% clear on. I know that there have been some issues there. The book is being sold now at a serial killer exhibit in Atlanta. I don't know exactly how I could get you a copy, but I will ask about that and see if I can get that for you. Here's my copy here.
I've seen that online. I've seen the cover online. Yeah.
Right. And Fabian actually worked with a good friend of mine on having this, picture drawn of Bundy over.
Really good. It's really good.
There's Kathy in the middle, and then the sheriff in Tallahassee, and then one of the prosecutors on the front. And it's really just kind of different tellings of different aspects of the killings. And I think it says a lot about what a human can do when their mind has been so probably traumatized. He went through a lot as a child, desensitized as well to the actions and the objectification of people, particularly women, for Bundy. It's very difficult to see that aspect in when we consider humanity. We want to believe that humanity is good, that we help each other, that, we are always going to do the right thing. But with someone like Bundy, someone with that mindset, they're very selfish, and they are uncaring about what the people around them, what their life is like, what their families think about them. And it horrifies me, but it also informs me. There are people around us every day that have that same kind of mentality. They may not kill, they may not rape, but they do other horrible things. It could be financial crimes, it could be crimes against children, it could be, any number of things. And it kind of keeps me maybe a little bit not stoic. It makes me feel like I can't just rest on my laurels and assume the good in everyone.
Now, one of the things, again, that people remark about his whole life, I mean, his being able to do this and for so long, the brazenness, because, again, anyone can go back and find it. And again, we're going to talk more about your book, but anyone, there's plenty of documentaries out there, so you know that he did not break into a house. I mean, he did sometimes break into a house, drag someone out, or rape them there. But he also just this thing of, I forget where he would pretend that he, hurt his arm or something. And so broad daylight at a beach, or, you had these places that, half of them were maybe in the middle of the night. But more times than not, the brazenness of walking up to someone, a woman, and talking to her, getting her interested, and she'll get in his car or he'll pull her in it. And those women, a lot of them did not escape.
What we see with Bundy, with the break-ins, that happened very early, and that happened at the end of his crime sprees. He became much more brazen and much slicker, I guess, when he started using the techniques of trying to draw women into the car so he didn't get caught in their home. It was less risk to him in the long run. But we also saw him revert to that behavior of breaking in when he was much more dysfunctional on the run in Florida. So it kind of speaks to, he backtracked in a way, reverted to his very early behavior. And I think that's fascinating, because most killers will graduate from disorganized to organized killing. They get better and better at it. But Bundy actually became more organized as he headed to Florida during his escape from Colorado prison.
Well, that's let's tell the audience because again, I just highlighted just a couple of things here on the Wikipedia, just as talking points, and I do remember from some of the research that I did that he actually killed a daughter of a police officer, raped and killed a daughter of a police officer, and then he was arrested or kidnapping. They found his tools of kidnapping,
Yes.
but my memory is they didn't. They knew who he kidnapped, but they did, and he was in prison for that. He was tried
Mhm.
and put in prison for that, but not for murders yet. Now, obviously, they're going to try and he escaped. Tell my audience that whole story.
Absolutely. This was when Bundy was living in Salt Lake City. He had moved out to Salt Lake from the Seattle Tacoma area to go to law school. So while he was there, of course, his killing spree had long been in effect. So for more than a year. And when he went to a mall, he was just kind of hanging out in the parking lot, watching women leave their cars and go into the mall. He actually followed a young woman into the mall and presented himself as a police officer and asked her if she had noticed someone trying to break into her car in the parking lot. And of course, because he had seen her walk into the mall, he knew which car was hers. So they go out to the car. He asked her to look in it to see if anything's missing. Of course, she says no. And then he says, well, I need to take a report from you anyway, even though nothing's missing. And what was interesting was the woman actually smelled alcohol on his breath at the time. He tried to use alcohol to help make it easier to do these things from time to time. And so she became suspicious, but he was very insistent, come to my car. We've got to go and fill out this report. So she goes to his car and it's a VW Bug. It's not a police car. So again, she's kind of going, what is going on here? She asks to see his badge and he just kind of flips out some cheap badge, and then just, so she can't really get a good look on it. But he understands that young women, young people will actually do what people in authority want them to do most of the time. So he's using this knowledge to his advantage. He did manage to get her in the car and take off. And as soon as she realized they were not going to the police station because she was local to the area, she managed to get out of the car with one handcuff on her hand. He'd actually accidentally put both sides of the handcuff on one wrist and like an idiot.
I don't want to laugh, but I mean, yeah, that's
it's good thing that he messed that up. He actually had pulled a gun on her in the car, but she was determined to get away. So she got out of the car, flagged down an older couple, and they drove her to the police station. Later, the key to those handcuffs was found in the parking lot where another young woman went missing. So he didn't get Carol DeRanch that day. He actually did end up getting a young high school student.
And again, he's captured and imprisoned. And I'm not sure. You could probably help me with this. What level of was this like a really high security prison? How did he? I forget. How did he escape?
Bundy escaped twice, not for lack of trying other times. They actually did thwart more of his escape attempts at different prisons, one in Utah, one in Florida. But he officially escaped from two different prisons in Colorado. The first one was in Aspen, Colorado, and he managed to escape from the prison itself. And no, I'm sorry. This was where he jumped out of the law library. So, yes. So, I've been out to both of the places where he escaped in Colorado, and it was the second floor on the law library, but the building kind of tilts backwards, so it almost feels like 2.5 floors that he jumped from. And having done so, he ended up spraining his ankle. Still, he runs, doesn't make it far. He ends up getting lost. And so he wanders around 7 or 8 days out there before he's actually caught. So then he's brought back, and he's driven to a different prison. This is in Glenwood Springs, so it's about an hour away from Aspen. And Glenwood Springs, he ends up losing a lot of weight. This is his escape took place about 6 months after the first one, and he loses a lot of weight. He manages to shimmy out of the roof of his prison cell and into the apartment of a jailer that lived there in an apartment. He took some of the jailer's clothes. I'm sure he took some money, whatever he could find to take with him. And he did actually manage to hitchhike out of that area and make his way down to Florida.
Now, how long was he out before he then started up again in Florida, which is, thank God, ultimately where he's caught. But how long between, how long should he wait before he starts trying to do it again?
Well, he arrived in Florida on January 8th of 1978, and he committed the first known crime on January 15th. So a week. Yeah, after having told himself, I'm going to lay low, I'm going to find a job and manage to stay off the radar. 7 days later, he'd already found a young woman that he was living off campus of the University of Florida in Tallahassee, and Florida State University. Let me make sure I get that right. Right there in Tallahassee, he was living in a rooming house, and you walk half a block. I've actually walked this whole area that he was in Tallahassee. You walk half a block, you're on campus. So he was already stalking a young woman who lived off campus. And that's what was happening when he actually did commit his first crimes. He was trying to get to her that night.
So how did they run him down?
So the way they found him was kind of Bundy's fault. It was kind of accidental. He had actually had the attacks at Florida State and then off-campus Florida State. And then almost a month later, he drove east about an hour and murdered a 12-year-old girl. She was his final victim. And a few days later, he got spooked. He couldn't pay the rent of the rooming house he was living in, so he decided to take off for Alabama. Now, he's in the panhandle of Florida, so all he's got to do is go west to hit Alabama. Right before he gets there in Pensacola, which is one of the last stops before Alabama, he is trying to steal a vehicle, and it's 3 a.m. A local officer sees him. This is a small town or small area of town, and pulls him over, and Bundy runs. And so the officer gets suspicious, of course. People who are not guilty generally don't run. So he ends up tussling with Bundy a couple of different times. He ends up firing his weapon a couple times, and Bundy finally allows him to arrest him and asks the officer to shoot him. Says along the lines of, "I wish you had shot me." And so at that point, then he's taken into court. He won't identify himself because he's in Florida. Nobody there knows who he is. And so, but he's not allowed bond until he identifies himself. So eventually, after he asked for a couple of phone calls to call people back in Washington State, he finally reveals who he is. I feel like he really wanted to get a big reaction out of the people when he gave them his name. They didn't know who he was, so there was no reaction. And it did not feed his ego, which was disappointing to him.
Well, I was going to ask that question, which you've answered. I was going to say when the cop caught him, and because of what he was doing, it had nothing to do with, it wasn't at all points or anything on him. And so he didn't know he had Ted Bundy, did he?
No, he wouldn't give him his name for one.
Wow.
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about I love the blog idea. I want to talk a little bit about that. And then I want to talk about some of the people you interviewed for the book, because I know based on some of the things I've seen in the review with some, different people. So certainly some interesting people you may have interviewed. And of course, you mentioned Kathy Kleiner.
Mhm.
I interviewed her. We did a great
Ah,
podcast. Also, Rhonda Stapley, which was another, I did them almost back to back. I just sort of found them and they were very
mhm,
cordial or very, they really wanted to talk about it and, for whatever good things can come out of that. So when you were doing the blog,
mhm.
how about is it? Are you still doing it, or was it something you've sort of retired?
So, so because of billing issues, I've had difficulty bringing it back online. So it's the information is all still out there, but I've got to figure a way to get it back online. So I'm working on that. Um, Really, the idea behind the blog was I wanted kind of a one-stop shop for everything Bundy. So let's talk about his sock fetish. Let's talk about the thefts that he committed and didn't get caught for. Let's talk about his juvenile crimes, how he got along with women versus men. I mean, I try to really give kind of a broad view of everything Ted Bundy, and talk about his family, what we know about them. Of course, we can speculate in many ways, but you want to base that on what we already know and what we can prove as well. But a great deal of it was kind of my interpretation of a lot of the information. I did get a lot of really good feedback from the public and people that had questions or just wanted to offer more information. The whole idea is just there's so much misinformation out there, and a lot of things get blown out of proportion, or you repeat something wrong so many times it becomes fact, if you will. And that was something that I was really trying to erase. Just let's put out what we know out there. We can talk about that, but let's not put out misinformation.
Now, I think you mentioned again in this again, maybe something I saw in the reviews of the book that you
Mhm.
did, like you talked to attorneys, you talked to his
Yes.
attorney, or that what was the now was this after he was executed or after he was tried and convicted and waiting to be executed? Was it when it was all over?
So the interviews happened long after Bundy was executed. He was executed in 1989. I was only 13, so a little young to interview them. But throughout writing this book and doing the blog, I've interviewed some really fascinating people. I interviewed one of the prosecutors in Florida. Actually got to meet him in person. That was fascinating. Larry Simpson. He is so smart.
And he was played in one of the movies by Jim Parsons, Sheldon from Big Bang Theory, but I digress.
I've met, of course, Kathy Kleiner, and then her roommate, Karen. I got to interview her. I interviewed the young lady that lived next door to the woman he was stalking in Tallahassee. They were very good friends, and her phone call actually saved her friend's life. And so talking with Debbie Ciccarelli was really fascinating. One of the big ones for me was the sheriff that took Bundy into custody in Tallahassee. He's very controversial because a lot of people feel like he was showboating and, trying to kind of get famous for being the person that arrested Bundy. But I found him to be very forthright. He knew what he had when he had him, and he never let Bundy take advantage of him or any of the staff in the jail there in Tallahassee.
Now, again, interviewing people long after the fact, because you're only 13, what was some of the opinions you were hearing from people who knew him?
Very real and did not speak well of him. The only person who really kind of believed he might be innocent was a journalist that interviewed him, Lucky Severson. And it was more that I think, first of all, Lucky is the personality. He's very upbeat and very optimistic, and he wants to believe a good, in my opinion. And, Bundy just came across in the interviews, and you can actually go online and watch them, as being very, if you look at it, very manipulative, but he could also be seen as, very jovial. He kind of laughs a little bit, and then he kind of gets very serious and talks about the charges against him. And Lucky did not want to think he was guilty, I think. But others, the sheriff said that he knew who he had when he had him. And the first thing he said when they came out of the Sally Port into the hallway of the prison, his name's Ken Katsaris. He actually grabbed Bundy and grabbed his arm and said, "You're in Leon County, Florida now. You're not going anywhere." And, they had kind of a frenemy relationship. Bundy would be really, really nice, but then he would also be trying to manipulate him. And, when Katsaris actually did a public indictment of Bundy, which is rare and is part of how he got a bad reputation. But by some people, they felt like he was just showing off what he could do to this suspected killer. And Bundy, for me, it really brought out a lot of who Bundy really was. He's scared, but he's trying to control the narrative. And, you kind of see him deer in headlights. He's kind of staring at these cameras of the media. And when I spoke with the sheriff, the former sheriff now, I told him I really appreciated being able to see that, and again, I don't know what the political situation was at that time, but for me, it's an insight into who Bundy was.
Now, he never along the line in any of these cases or being, charged with it, he never claimed insanity, correct?
No, he didn't. He was really adamant about not being seen as being crazy. And I think that a lot of that had to do with his childhood. His grandmother dealt with very serious depression, and she had electric shock, and I think that Bundy, just a child from the 40s, being raised to think, psychiatry is bad and you're weak if you are, have mental disorder. And I don't know that he was, that he had necessarily a mental issue on that level where he didn't know what was happening. But, he clearly had several personality disorders, and he was diagnosed as such.
Now, you probably continuing with this, I'm assuming, going forward. But you also mentioned in your bio, which I found next to the article you wrote for the Quarterly, which was very good, and I'll point people to that in a moment, that you're thinking of other people now. Who are you thinking of now?
Well, I am writing for True Crime Quarterly, and so I've actually got my own EJ's crime review. And so Bundy was the first article I did, but this next one I'm working on is about Israel Keyes. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him.
I am not. Share it with my audience.
Yes, absolutely. So Keyes was a killer from Washington State and then later Alaska. And he was thought to have been killing from approximately 1998 until he was arrested in 2012. What's so fascinating about him for me is, number one, he didn't have a specific victim type. He would kill based on the availability of the victims. If he was hanging out at a state park and kind of waiting for people to come to him, he would take what he got. Whoever's coming, that's who he's going to murder. He also would commit bank robberies to fund his kills because he would travel throughout the country and commit these crimes. He would commit bank robberies, and then he would take the money and fly out, let's say, to Chicago, rent a car, drive all the way out to New York State, find a kill kit that he had left buried there, and then he would, find the people that he was going to kill on that trip. A lot of times he would turn his phone off. So, he understood what he was doing. And personally, I think he was one of the most terrifying killers because there was no predictability. You could not say, well, he only killed this type of person or he only killed in this part of the country. He understood he needed to stay far away from his victims. And there are only 3 known victims of him, but they believe he killed at least 11 people based on what the interviews he had with the FBI. So he's fascinating. So I'm working on an article about him. And I really just want to branch out to a bunch of different killers, different aspects of their kills that we don't think about normally. So
well, that's why I like you, because I do like I said, different, there's so much true crime out there, and I appreciate it because that's the genre I'm in. And but you can get, even with an unknown one like that, you might say, well, there's something interesting about it, like I said, that he was not traceable in a sense that we've got John Douglas and we've got the profilers, and this is, and I mean, we all watch true crime. I mean, even fictional. I love fictional as well. And it's like, okay, within the 60 minutes, or if it's an hour and a half, we're going to figure this out. And look what he left behind. But with someone who just doesn't have even, an MO, without an MO, you're in a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
And so someone like him is not. Now, I'm assuming, because you're talking sort of in the past tense, he was caught, correct?
He was caught, yes.
And jailed, prosecuted, and he's in prison, or was he executed, or what?
No, he committed suicide.
Okay, well, that saves the state a little work.
It does. It left a lot of mystery, but he was, if you watch the interview that he gave to the FBI, extremely controlling. You get a sense of this really evil personality, and he was only in his 30s when he was arrested. So still, quite young compared to a lot of them. And there's just something so disturbing about him. Not just that he killed indiscriminately, but he really was able to be two different people. Nobody knew the real Israel Keys. So, yeah, he's fascinating. And I will probably work on a book about him as well, just because he's so interesting to me. Yeah.
So now at this point, I do want to put out to my audience the name of the book. And because, again, hopefully it will be worked out with your publisher and it will come back. Because everything, as I said, I repeat myself, but if you go online, all the reviews are still there. But then if you click on Amazon, it's not there. But the people who said some really nice things about it. So that the book is called Ted Bundy, Memoirs. No, that's what I said one time. Yeah. Not memoirs. Ted Bundy, Memories of the Beast. And that was written by you, E.J. Hammon, which I have to point out, because the way we all speak, it's Hammon without a D.
Without a D.
Without a D. Yes. So if you're look for it without the D. And there was also a co-author, and you did tell that we're going to put that. I will keep that in there. It was quite interesting how you work with a French author, Fabian Richard. And so it's co-authored. And so again, hopefully that's going to come back. Now, you say the podcast, the blog may get back out there.
Yes.
So do you mind if I say people should just go to your Facebook and camp there?
Yeah, they can.
Is that good? I mean, some people go, well, your Facebook is just under E.J. Hammon. That's how I found you. And so obviously when that comes back up, and I don't know, do you have a follow or just friend button? People have follow.
There's a follow as well.
Follow. So if they follow, if you have something new, it should come to them, right? It should great. And so if I didn't click follow, I'll go back and do that, because I do want to read the blog. I think that's people write blogs. I've never done one because I'm afraid nobody's going to read it. But I mean, if you're writing and writing and writing is one thing, and it's great to get it out. Especially, we won't get political right here, but the Times, they are a sinking. So sometimes it's important just to be able to get, but for people then to read it enough to then send even just that's good, or, hey, I want to add to this. That's fantastic. I mean, it's a great thing. And I'm glad that I'm sure there's a lot more out there like that, but yours sounds like fun. So I want to, when it can come back out again, even just to read what went on in the past about that. And then you may start a blog about this guy or whatever when time is right. So I always give the last say to my guests. So anything that that you came across, anything that came up because we were chatting, anything that you want to share with people that listen to Murder Most Foul.
Absolutely. So we did kind of go a little bit over the True Crime Quarterly magazine. And so that is something that I'm working on. I believe the next one's coming out April 1st. And it's a great collection of different true crime authors, different things, such as, like I said, I'm generally doing serial killers, but there are other types of, there's trivia out there. There's some information on this and this articles about the Delphi killings, and the individual that was just sentenced recently for the murders of the two girls that were killed in Delphi, Indiana. And so we really try to bring out a lot of variety there. I've worked very closely with the editor of the magazine. He's fantastic. He knows so much about crime. So definitely check out True Crime Quarterly if you can. I think you just can Google that and it's going to bring up a link.
I did. That's awesome. All I got to do.
Perfect.
Well, yeah. Again, I wanna thank you for spending time with me today on talking about, again, something that is kind of hard to cover in a new way, because he is, as you said earlier, he's the top. And thank God he's not with us anymore, but his victims are. And again, you've interviewed victims, and I'm going to point people again to my two podcasts they can look it up on my feed. And it's, I forgot the titles. One was Monster in My Bedroom, and the other was I Survived Ted Bundy. And I don't remember which one was Rhonda Stapley and which one was Kathy Kleiner Rubin. But I interviewed both of them within a couple of months, and they were very gracious, and they survived so long ago. And I don't remember which one it was when I interviewed her. She kept quiet for a long time. I'm not sure. One of them sort of was talking earlier, but one of the two women kept it in for a long time and talking about it and sharing it in other ways. And again, I know that Kathy wrote it. Well, I think they both wrote books, but I know Kathy did. And
Kathy's, Kathy's is called A Light in the Dark.
A Light in the Dark. So once again, I want to thank you, E.J. Hammon. I want you to have a great evening.
You too. Thanks for having me.
In closing, please listen to Ted Bundy in his own words on the eve of his execution.
There is just absolutely no way to describe, first, the brutal urge to do that kind of thing, and then what happens is once it has been more or less satisfied and recedes, you might say, or spent, that sense, that kind of energy level recedes, and basically I became myself again. I want people to understand this too, and I'm not saying this gratuitously because it's important people understand this, that basically I was a normal person. I wasn't some guy hanging out at bars or a bum, or I wasn't a pervert in the sense that, people look at somebody and say, I know there's something wrong with him, and just tell. I mean, I was essentially a normal person. I had good friends. I led a normal life, except for this one small but very potent and very destructive segment of it that I kept very secret, very close to myself, and didn't let anybody know about it. And part of the shock and horror from my dear friends and family years ago when I was first arrested was that there was no clue. They looked at me and they looked at the all-American boy, and I wasn't perfect, but I want to be quite candid with you. I was okay. I was. And the basic humanity and basic spirit that God gave me was intact, but it unfortunately became overwhelmed at times. And I think people need to recognize that it's not some kind of those of us who have been so much influenced by violence in the media, in particular pornographic violence, are not some kinds of inherent monsters. We are your sons and we are your husbands.